Cryptocurrency payment integration for iGaming operators. The time of extortionate fees for payment service providers is coming to an end as new solutions emerge to address market concerns. Goodbye PayPal. Hello Bitcoin SV. Moderated by Jimmy Nguyen, Bitcoin Association. Eduardo Aguilera. George Payne, GatePay.
I'll be moderating the panels this afternoon, so let's give a warm round of applause to Eduardo and George. Why don't we begin by just each of you telling us about who you are and what your companies do to give some background to our audience.
Well, sure. My name is Eduardo Aguilera. I come from the iGaming group, and we are like the biggest crypto casinos in the world currently, I would presume. And we are slowly entering the Fiat world and trying to onboard new payment providers and users into this crypto world.
Hi, I'm George. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of GatePay. So we're a cryptocurrency payments processor and gateway, but we also do fiat payments as well. And so we're based in San Francisco, but we have operations in an office in Europe as well.
Okay, so obviously accepting cryptocurrency as a deposit and withdrawal method for iGaming has been, discussed and used for a lot of years. What are the benefits you're seeing now from an iGaming perspective that people have not realized or not fully leveraged?
Well, one of the things I think is the transparency for the user, because the users, when they deposit right now with fiat currencies, they don't know where their money goes. And if they use cryptocurrencies, you can tell them like, oh, your payment is being processed, and it will be in your account in a few seconds.
Right. They can track it on the blockchain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think specifically with gaming, one of the crucial elements is speed.
Yes.
It's not really something you want to be held up by. So it's from what we're finding is that the quicker you can process a payment and have that confirmed, it makes everyone's life easier, and the UI is especially optimized for us.
Yeah. Why don't you give the audience a comparison in speed between doing a cryptocurrency deposit, let's say, in the systems you work with versus fiat?
Well, I think it also depends on the market, because here in the European Union, we, of course, have SEPA deposits, which is very fast. But if you compare it with other markets, like Latin America, for example, like when a user deposits, the money can arrive like in a few hours or in a few days, and you as an operator, you have not really idea or control about what will happen. And with cryptos, since you have this transparency and this speed, and depending on which coin you are using, you can offer the speed, as George mentioned, for the user.
Yeah, it's rapid compared to what we'd have for processing. Again, it depends on the payment rails it's on, and there's a few other sort of variables in there. Right. But yeah, there's some major advantages with the payment speed.
What about transaction fee cost comparisons?
Well, as we heard in the panel before, it can vary because it's very volatile, and also like the price and the fees. But I think the second and the third wave of cryptos, they are lowering the fees, and they are making it more accessible for both the user and the operator to process. So I think it's an interesting feature of what will happen with the fees.
So Craig's speech emphasized a lot the public nature of at least the Bitcoin blockchain and why that is an advantage in terms of transparency, as you've talked about for players. But how will this help in your mind if operators are taking public blockchain cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin? How will that help from an auditing and regulatory perspective? Because I think that's something that is lost in the discussion too often.
Well, one of the biggest challenges is when you're talking about fiat, for example, is the regulators need to trust you as an operator, right?
Correct.
And when you use cryptos, they don't need to trust you because they can
verify themselves.
They can verify themselves. They can go and look and see what's happening real in your business.
Yeah, I think there's some major advantages with that. We've got to remember that as all the sessions before this with the regulation, I think it's something that it's with the gaming industry, particularly like gambling, it's something to embrace because good capital is attracted by good regulation.
Yes.
You don't want it to be the Wild West. Like that's when it's going to fall apart. You want sort of solid regulation you can rely upon. And so we have, the audit trail is a really good system for various different things like gambling, showing that you make these payments as well. But there's some advantages, and I think there's work to be done as well with the KYC, because that's consistently the stumbling block with any jurisdiction is the KYC. So as soon as there's partly the understanding of blockchain, the education, the education behind it. And once you can facilitate that, you can optimize the KYC. Everyone's going to be a winner here.
Yeah, and in the Bitcoin SV ecosystem, we're very proactive in the regulation area and compliance. So a lot of the companies in our ecosystem are building KYC and AML compliance into, let's say, their wallet systems, their exchange systems, and that's something that I think would help gaming operators as well, because if you don't actually have to do the KYC yourself, but can rely upon other systems to do it, that helps. Obviously, gaming operators can do it as well. One thing I think that people mistake about Bitcoin all the time is that it's anonymous, and therefore people have used it for illegal activities since early in its days. And what is coming out with a lot of government action, including the United States, is that it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous.
Yeah.
There's privacy attached to it, but it is the worst possible place to commit crimes on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Because it is traceable. And I think that's something that would help the iGaming industry with regulators as well.
Yeah, of course. Actually, in our company, one thing that our fraud department handles a lot is that on fiat currencies, it's very hard to track abusers, for example. But with cryptos, it's super easy to detect when someone is multi-accounting, for example.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I think for the most part, a lot of it is, there are all these sort of naturally inbuilt advantages with Bitcoin, but the problem is that it has a bit of a branding problem with regulators, and so they will forever see, they will see it indefinitely as sort of like an odd area that we need to work on, and so the quicker that you can bring in the education's so much of a part of this, interact, and so having that sort of like education behind it to allow regulators to see the advantages beyond things like cash deposits, which you can't track. So, there's major advantages just when they sort of realize that.
So there's a lot of advantages to taking cryptocurrency for payments, but clearly there's challenges, right? That's why I hear sometimes when I talk to companies in the iGaming space, they'll say, yeah, I would love to do it, but, right? So let's talk about what are some of the key hurdles and challenges and how they can best be solved for this industry.
Well, one of the things I hear the most is about banking, for example, because you can accept cryptos in your website or in your land-based casino, right? But then how do you transform this money into fiat? And it's very common that banks right now, they hear Bitcoin and they get super scared and they run away. So I think it's important to have a strong partner in the fiat or in the normal payment industry, so you can have a fast cash flow.
Yeah, the banking is a huge thing. I think another really big thing is general UI. And I think this is true of a lot of Bitcoin projects altogether. And you need to bring more value than just saying, oh, the technology is better, because ultimately a lot of businesses and innovators will overvalue certain innovations, certain technologies, and customers undervalue it. And so if you can bring that major sort of 10x values to something, that they're going to come on board. But specifically with the UI, one of the obstacles as well is that when you have the different wallet systems and stuff, and you don't have, it's not as seamless as making a fiat payment, and that is holding people back from sort of making deposits or anything like that. So I mean, that's what we directly work at, optimizing the UI flow. But it's definitely something to bear in mind when building out gaming systems, is that they need to have the payment UI flow to be like, oh, I don't have to come out of the game, make the payment come back, because it's crypto. It needs to be seamless.
Yes. What I'm seeing certainly in the BSV world is efforts to create more of a universal wallet systems, right? Where wallets can have APIs that connect with all kinds of applications, not just gaming, but all across the internet, so that you as a user have a single wallet or maybe a couple of wallets and link to different applications. That would make it a lot easier. Let's talk about security. Are there concerns about having to maintain custody and security of coins in wallets for operators?
Well, I think it goes both ways, because in the fiat world, you don't hold your money. Like, it doesn't belong to you. It's somewhere in a bunch of layers of third parties. But with cryptos, the operators have the opportunity to actually hold their money and be in control with it. So it can be dangerous because if you make a mistake, you might lose it, of course.
Right.
But if you have a strong team and maybe a strong partner, it will help you to get rid of all these third parties.
Yeah, and I think this actually, again, goes back to sort of the current issue at the moment with when you have custodial versus non-custodial. And then when you have these hacks because people aren't holding their own private keys, they're centralizing it, and so they're adding on the centralization here. Again, so yeah, that's definitely something that should be kept borne in mind. We work with various different wallets and stuff that are sort of both, so it's definitely something to bear in mind. But actually, the technology behind it is safe, it's structured. It's just what you do with the private keys that ultimately decides it.
Yeah, and Craig has some inventions that the N-Chain team will be developing implementations of that change the signature process. So instead of maintaining private keys, you don't really have to maintain them. You create a threshold signature system and other split key systems where the key is split into fragments and algorithmically reconstructed at the time to send a transaction. I think that would definitely boost security. What about price volatility? That's a huge question in the cryptocurrency world. If you're accepting cryptocurrency for payments, you're paying out to affiliates, to players. How best can you tell operators and developers to deal with the price swings of cryptocurrency?
The first advice I would give is to not have all of your cash in crypto right now because it's very volatile. But at the same time, it's an advantage because a lot of people is buying cryptos in the hope that the price will go up and they will be able to buy a Lambo, right? That's like the common knowledge. Right. But when the price goes down, it's like, okay, I have so many cryptos, all these Bitcoins, what do I do with them? So I go and spend them. And this creates an opportunity for the operators to accept cryptos and make a marketplace where people can actually spend their coins.
Yeah, so we actually built an on-chain zero confirmation solution for BTC. Okay. And so we can basically do anything instantaneously. We have a very low processing fee of about 0.7% plus 20 cents, which eats any residual, but there shouldn't actually, in theory, be any residual. We haven't seen any residual in terms of price volatility. So we can actually ensure instantaneous conversion to fiat from crypto. Okay. We do fiat as well, but with crypto,
and do you do the exchange yourself or use a back-end exchange provider?
Yeah, so per jurisdiction, we'll have partners to sort of make us a bit more regulatory compliant.
Got it. So talking about wallets again for a moment, do you have any advice or perspective on whether, let's say if you're an operator, it's better to do the wallet management in-house or outsourcing it to one of the many custodial wallet service providers that exist out there?
Well, it all depends on your tech team. And also about what coin will you use, because right now there are so many variants coming out. And the payment provider partners, there are not a lot as in the fiat world, right? So just in the expo, you can look around and you don't see advertised like Tron or EOS, or there are hundreds of different coins.
Right. Too many, in my view.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to get down to a world of a dominant, digital currency and dominant blockchain as opposed to 1,000.
So it will be hard to find a partner for one of each of these currencies. So that's actually an advantage of going in-house.
No, yeah, I would say, my biggest frustration with a lot of sort of Bitcoin projects and everything is just the UI, because ultimately it needs to be very, very sort of straightforward. People who are non-early adopters.
Too complicated for the normal user.
And
right?
so there are wallets.
Why do you think
that
is? I have my thoughts, but I'm curious. Why do you think cryptocurrency applications and UIs have been so complicated? I think it's because the crypto world got taken over for too many years by sort of this crypto techie sort of, I call it, it's keeping it in a little crypto hobbyist land instead of trying to go to the masses.
100%. So I think, there are obviously advantages doing in-house, but ultimately there are some really great wallets out there who have amazing sort of like UI. They're incredibly well integrated. And and it's another expense as well. If you're a game provider, the margins are going to be razor thin if there are any. And so maybe have more of your resources focused on developing the game and less so on the wallet. But look out for integrations because people, they need to be integrated as much as you need to have a wallet. So
is it better, though, for the gaming operators to focus on that or hopefully have some great wallet providers emerge that create the simplicity? Because it's one of the things any business has to face. Do I build it myself, or do I look for a good solution that exists in the marketplace?
Well, I think one thing that is well known is as a business, you know how to do one thing and focus on that, and everything try to outsource it. But it's also about, can you outsource it? Because of course, if you find a partner, it's one of the best things you can do because you externalize this risk. But if you don't have this possibility of outsource it, so what do? You have to do it yourself.
It just depends on the use case.
Sure.
There's going to be some where there's a natural fit and there's a wallet sort of already there, whereas other ones, I mean, like, I wouldn't necessarily advocate creating your own bullshit coin or whatever, but there's definitely some strong use cases for doing either.
I'll give you an example of how we're addressing that in the BSV world with better user experiences. So we wanted to get rid of the clunky Bitcoin addresses that people use to send and receive Bitcoin, the 26 characters, which scare people and are clunky. So people sometimes use QR codes. There's a wallet in our ecosystem that uses NFC technology to be able to just send easily. But a number of companies in our ecosystem got together for a wallet workshop earlier this year, and they created a new protocol called PayMail, which basically allows you to use an email address to send Bitcoin. So you can create essentially a wallet that on the back end converts a email address to the ability to send to a wallet. So users never have to ever see a Bitcoin address again. So that's rolling out, and I think that's the kind of user experience improvement that would make it a lot better for not just gaming, but all kinds of applications.
100%. Yeah, we are actually developing, we already have developed like iBeacon technology, so you can be in a store and then notification pops up, and then so going back to what Apple did really sort of revolutionize the idea of a retail store. It turns into an experience. People, the cashier is a pain point. It's sort of like it gives people the opportunity to reconsider a purchase. And I'm not saying you don't necessarily want sort of like impulse purchases, but if you can optimize that, you can make the retail experience better. And ultimately, like the high street requires that at the moment. So it's always something from a payments perspective that we're looking at.
So what is some advice you can give the audience and people watching this video later about how to make the integration process for cryptocurrency payments smoother if you're an operator or if you're having to build that functionality into games as a developer?
Well, how crypto works is very different, but I think operators need to focus on make it very similar on how the fiat processes go in a user's perspective. So if I'm a user and I go to a website, I would like to interact with cryptocurrencies the same way I interact with fiat, with my euro deposits, for example. Because as soon as I hear like confirmations or, as you mentioned, I see a weird character address, I get a bit scared of what will happen. So I think operators should onboard these fiat users into this crypto world, but in a very familiar way. So something they feel that they already know, instead of trying to introduce a new payment method.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It needs to be sort of, and that's what we do with our sort of checkout process as well, is that it's integrated with fiat. So it's fiat as well as crypto. It's not, you need to go to this wallet to put in this address, and it's a whole clunky, because that will put people off. The early adopters is great for them because they're interested in technology. But for your average user, they're not going to want to have that pain point. And so thinking from a value perspective, what they're just going to end up doing a euro or pound or dollar deposit instead of a crypto. And then miss out on all the advantages.
Is there any advice you can give to the industry for how they can better manage regulator interests and concerns about taking cryptocurrency payments?
I think it's just about knowledge and communication. First, you need to understand the technology, so you can later explain it to these regulators and old school people of the industry of how this works and how this actually can benefit them and benefit everyone.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately about being transparent. There's of course we see, a few of these companies rising when they're a bit sort of like they're ahead of the regulators, and that has worked very well in a lot of sort of like examples. So I'm pretty sure in Africa with M-Pesa, they actually went sort of. They built before the regulators, and that's allowed them to really expand rapidly, and now they're on board. But I think in this particular space, like we have been in the game for a little while, You need to be transparent, open. The KYC is a really big thing, so having systems in place to facilitate that, that's what it's about at the moment. But ultimately, if you can bring value and show that ultimately, everyone wins, and it's a win-win economically.
I like win-wins.
Behind that, exactly. Yeah. Sure.
Let's focus on the KYC process while we have a few moments left, because that's often, a stumbling block, a hurdle, which some companies don't want to go through. So that's where you lose players sometimes. What are some practical tips you can provide about how to make the KYC process smoother, better in the crypto world, but also to satisfy regulator demands?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually developing a digital identity on the blockchain, it's separate to this. And so that sort of will tie into it eventually. It has other IoT integration applications at the moment. But one of the systems that we're sort of looking at the moment is, what I would say is that, whilst seeing KYC as a pain point is one perspective, the other perspective is it's a signal and noise thing, right? If it's too much of a payment, sort of too much of a pain point, then how valuable is what you've created?
Right.
You've got to put it, it's a bit of putting it to the test a bit.
Right.
Another thing is that if there's got to be some level of not necessarily pain, but there's got to be some stumbling block to sort of get rid of some of the bad actors initially. And so, the KYC is an important, viewpoint from a lot of things. You can actually extract a lot of value as a developer from it, because you can understand that if people are willing to go through a process to establish, the KYC stuff, and then still go to the game, I've created something valuable. I need to sort of focus in on what I'm doing. But then using it, as a system as well, you obviously don't want to have a completely cumbersome process that does get rid of players. But yeah, there's systems in place, there's integrations you can have for the KYC system. I think making it straightforward, simple, but also not necessarily seeing it as a bad thing. And this is, again, where the regulators are going to come on board. So don't ignore it. It's a really important part of anything as well.
Yeah, and also if you, for example, manage to KYC an address, like a Bitcoin address, for example, and you need to KYC another account or whatever, you can already identify that these two addresses, it's the same person.
Yeah.
So you can take the advantage of the KYC in a more effective way and more useful, of course.
What I'm hoping to see as we close out this panel is a world of more universal identity management, identity objects on the blockchain, just like what you're developing. There's a company in the BSV world which is using the BSV blockchain to create an identity management system where you keep essentially on the blockchain information about your identity that has been verified through a process, and you can make it available to different companies whenever you choose through encryption keys, and have a universal store of identity management. And that hopefully will make things like the KYC process easier, not just for iGaming, but other accounts that need the KYC process. You're not uploading the same information to different websites like people have to do today, but that you're giving access to a publicly available, but yet privately encrypted file of identity management on the blockchain. I think that future would be great for the iGaming industry. It's one thing I've been talking to government agencies about to get them comfortable with that idea, because if regulators accept that, I think that's a big win for iGaming. Yeah. Any final thoughts for our audience about the future of cryptocurrency payments for iGaming? What would you like to see it in the next few years?
Well, the only thing I can say is don't be afraid of this new technology, and it's a whole new market. Like right now, as George mentioned, it's like the early adopters are already in the game. But right now, it's the time where the regular users are starting coming into this new crypto world.
Yeah, well, as I've sort of spoken, with quite a few people about, is that cryptocurrency and gaming does not need to be this gimmicky marketing thing. It actually has incredible power here. Gaming could be a vehicle for cryptocurrency adoption, and cryptocurrency can be a vehicle for certain games adoption. So we can imagine a world where in virtual reality where cryptocurrency actually allows a audit trail for digital assets within a game, an illustrious player online being monetarily rewarded in real life. So I think there's some incredible sort of like beyond just or pay or make a quick deposit for a gambling game. There's really, and sort of bear that in mind, I think there's going to be some incredible sort of like progress made there.
Yeah, and that's a great final observation. Really think about cryptocurrency and blockchain technology as capable of more, right? It's been capable of so much more than just a payment alternative. Part of the reason I think people haven't thought that has been the scaling battles that have plagued Bitcoin. Bitcoin didn't scale, and therefore you could never create this future of more powerful blockchain usage. We and so many others in the crypto world are trying to change that and unlock the power of crypto payments for all in iGaming and beyond. Thank you to Eduardo and George for joining me on this discussion.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.